Hi there, Sonja from the Art of Stamping here with another card making video for you. And a very special video indeed, because today I'm joining a fabulous group of crafters for Julia Altermann's 10k YouTube subscribers blog hub. Julia is a wonderful friend I got to know throughout my crafty adventures in the virtual world, and I'm so happy for her to have reached this milestone. Now, while I'm hugely honored to be chosen to participate in this hop, you'll have the chance to win lots of awesome prizes. But as I said, it's a blog hop, not a video hop. So if you want to win, you'll have to hop over to my blog, to which I'll link below in the YouTube description to find out how. But now to my card. Julia set a topic for her blog hop, and that's celebrating kindness. So of course my card is all about celebration. Now, people who follow my blog or know some of my cards might realize that one element of this card is not new to me, and that's the rainbow sentiment. A few weeks ago I already shared a card with the exact same sentiment, and a lot of my readers, including Julia, liked it so much that I thought I'd grab the opportunity of this hop to show you how I did it. Well, let's start by introducing the supplies I used to make this card. First off, I cut out a panel from craft cardstock with Mama Elephant's all prettied up die set. I used the large rectangle and the circle die from this set. And the cardstock I use is by Crafter's Companion. It's a rough cardstock with quite a bit of tooth, which helps a lot when coloring with colored pencils, because it virtually grabs the pigment from the lead and ties it to the paper, if that makes any sense. I'm also using a piece of sketch paper especially designed for colored pencils for the balloons in the back. It's called Nostalgie by German manufacturer Hahnemühle. It feels quite smooth, but nonetheless has tooth enough to work wonderfully with colored pencils. I've also pre-cut a top-folding card base, and I chose two stamps by Purple Onion Designs for my card, the Balloon Trio and the Celebrate Like Crazy sentiment. I'll stamp down the first with My Favorite Things hybrid ink in black licorice, and the latter one with white unicorn pigment ink by Hero Arts. Last but not least, I do of course need colored pencils. A lot of colored pencils for a card like this, I must admit, but you'll need at least 2 different shades of each color to do the shading on the sentiment, and I mostly even use 3. I begin by stamping down the balloons that will later on show through the circle window I cut from my panel. I'm using my MISTI for this, and to find the right position for the image, I'm aligning it through the pre-cut panel first. I don't need to spend too much time to align the image though, because I still can adjust the angle in which I glue down the sketch paper on my card base later on. It doesn't matter if I glue it on askew, because it will be hidden behind the panel anyway, so this is quite an easy task. Next up, I'm stamping my sentiment. To do so, I'm using the acetate trick I already explained in one of my former videos. I'll try to link this up somewhere here in this video too, but let me just give you a brief summary of my technique. As I'm using a rubber stamp that I cannot see through, it's difficult to align it straight right at once. That's why I'm laying down a sheet of acetate on top of the paper I want to stamp on, and stamp my image down on that acetate sheet first. After that, I can adjust the position of the paper lying underneath until I'm happy with the result and think the stamp is aligned properly. I then remove the acetate, taking care that I don't move my paper again, and stamp my image. As I said, I'm using Hero Arts Unicorn pigment ink for my sentiment. It's the brightest and most opaque white pigment ink I've yet worked with, and it even gets brighter and a bit more opaque when it's stamped down multiple times. That's a quality I'm really looking for here, because the bright white surface will be helping my pencils to really shine later on. So for this card I stamped down the sentiment about 3 or 4 times in a row. And that's one thing I love my MISTI for, because I could never have stamped on the exact same spot more than once without it. Now, while the ink on the panel is drying, I'm coloring in the balloons. To match my sentiment, I'm using colored pencils for this. And I'm choosing 3 of the hues I'll be using on the sentiment later on as well. To color with colored pencils is a rather long process compared to coloring with Copics or watercolors, for example, because you need to carefully layer the different hues to obtain smooth gradients. I always start with my lightest color, which I lay down as a base in the areas where my shadows shall be. and I often leave the highlight areas untouched at first to make sure that they don't get too dark in the end. I then slowly layer on my darker hues, always moving from the darkest shadow areas to the highlights. To obtain a smooth surface, which I want to end up with here on the balloons, I'm constantly moving my pencil in a light circular motion. It's decisive to never press down too hard, because doing so you would destroy the paper's tooth, which would make it hard to add any more layers on top or to blend the colors smoothly into each other. The pencils I'm using are Polychromos by Faber-Castell. They are artist-grade colored pencils, and I love them very much because they are wonderfully intense, full of pigment, and glide smoothly over the paper without being too soft. Coloring fine detailed lines, such as hair or fur, is much easier to do with them than with the very soft Prismacolor pencils, for example. But basically you can follow my instructions with any colored pencil brand. Just try out what you have at home before investing into anything new. I've sometimes been surprised myself by what a great job even cheaper art supplies can do. Now, as it takes very long to color in these images, and as I also want to share how I colored in the sentiment, I will now speed up the process a bit and only show you how I colored in the first balloon. The technique I used on the other two balloons is just the same. One last word on my blending process. What you see me using here is a colorless blending pencil, and that is the only tool I use to help me with my blending when I think it's necessary in the end. Here it helps me smoothing out the lighter areas of the balloon a bit. A lot of people use Gamsol to blend colored pencils, but I find that it smooths out too much of the structure which colored pencils create. I really love the look of that structure and want to keep it as good as I can. That's why I'm only using the blender pencil, and that too only as the last step of my coloring. Now that the pigment ink has dried, I can go on to color in my sentiment. I've laid out all the pencils I want to use for it in advance. Generally, I'm using 3 hues of each color to create my shadows, but on tiny images like these letters, you could absolutely do with only 2 hues as well. You'd only need to adjust your drawing pressure a bit more to obtain a smooth gradient. I started with the pinks on the C, but unfortunately had a little camera failure while doing so I'll explain my procedure on example of the E, which I'm coloring in red. I first lay down an even coating of my lightest color, following the direction of the letter with my strokes. I'm starting to color slightly in the area of the pink I laid down before to make sure that the colors smoothly blend into one another. When I'm ready with my first layer, I start to build up the shadows. Generally, I've determined my light source in the upper right corner of my card, therefore it's the lower left elements of the letters that carry the shadows. As with the balloons, I'm gradually building up the color here. I first indicate the spots where my shadows shall go with my middle color, and then intensify it with my darkest hue. Then I go over it with my middle color and my lightest color again to create smooth color transitions. And that's basically it. The hardest part of this might be to sort out the right spots for the shadow areas. And if you're uncertain about this, it might be of help for you to stamp down the sentiment in a light gray hue on a piece of scratch paper first and indicate the shadow areas on it with pencil to have a guide when working with the colored pencils on your project. Now, while I'm coloring the rest of the letters, I'll be speeding up the coloring process again. I'll meet you at the end to show you how I finished off my card. Okay, now all elements of my card are finished and the only thing left to do is gluing it together. First I align the balloons behind my window panel at the exact spot I want them to go, and I use the window as a guide when gluing the balloons down to my card base. After that I'm adhering the panel using foam tape to give my card a bit of dimension. Now this already looks quite pretty and I could perfectly have kept the card like this, but I really love sequins and I think it's never a bad idea to put some shimmer on a party card. So I put down some clear and some star sequins to finish off my card and adhered them with matte medium. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Should you have any questions or remarks, just comment on my blog or in the YouTube section below. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe if you want to see more of what I do in card making. And don't forget to hop over to my blog for a chance to win and to participate in Julia's 10K YouTube subscribers blog hop. Have a nice day. Bye!